Hey, Tom here. Welcome to my channel, Tom Loves DIY. This is one of my DIY projects. This is my first, actually, sleeping bag. It started out as a quilt, and I tested it outside with a R Factor 2 sleeping pad in a fairly chilly night, and I found that I was getting cold in the middle of my back. So I remanufactured it and put in this baffle in the back using ClimaShield Apex insulation, 2 layers, and in between that a layer of SOL emergency blanket. By the way, if you're buying emergency blanket, don't get the $4 cheapos from Wally Mart, get the SOL brand. It is significantly superior and only a few dollars more. So after I put in the baffle with some Velcro, that's what holds it together, I can use this as a sleeping bag or as a quilt. And I find that depending on the temperature that I'm sleeping at and what sleeping pad I'm using, one or the other works well. So we've all seen YouTubes of people saying that quilts are better than sleeping bags because the insulation underneath your body gets compressed and basically becomes worthless. Well, that's the claim, and as Carl Sagan said,
but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
So I have yet to find any engineering or testing that shows that a quilt is warmer than a sleeping bag. It is intuitive that compressed insulation doesn't work as well, which is one reason why I use the Apex insulation and the SOL blanket layer underneath, because I think we also know that compressing synthetic is more difficult than compressing down. Try to get a synthetic bag into a stuff sack and you'll know what I'm talking about. So first off, the Apex doesn't compress as much. It probably retains more insulation, and that SOL emergency blanket is reflective, so it's going to shoot some of my body heat back toward me. So my test, finally getting around to that. So my test is I will set up my tent, my Nemo tensor, which is I think a 4.2 R value. I will put this quilt bag out there with the Govee temperature sensor underneath. I'll do it in 2 different nights, hopefully the same temperature. On one of them it will be inside with the bag closed up, and on the other it will be outside, still under my body, but directly on the Nemo tensor. And I will track the temperature from ambient to whatever it maxes out at. I'll put together some charts of the data so that you can see the temperature that the Govee registers starting and ending in both scenarios, sleeping bag or quilt. And maybe we can put to rest the idea that quilts are better than sleeping bags, or maybe we'll say, well, yeah, it's true, quilts are better. All that insulation under your body is worthless. Let's go find out. I'm outside. I've got my tent set up. Inside is my Nemo tensor sleeping pad with my homemade sleeping bag. I've had the Govee temperature sensor inside for about an hour and a half, so it's down to ambient temperature. I'm going to get in and see how having insulation under my body or no insulation affects how the Govee registered temperature. Hey, I'm back. Tests are completed. I'll give you the basic stats and then I'll show you the charts. The first night I used my quilt bag as a quilt with the Govee temperature sensor directly under my body and laying on top of the Nemo tensor sleeping pad. On the second night, I closed up the bag and put the Govee inside, so it is on top of the insulation next to my body. The first night, ambient temperature was 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and the Govee registered 88 as the maximum before it flatlined out. On the second night, I started at 54 degrees Fahrenheit, and it reached 90 degrees. using the sleeping bag mode. I think that's pretty significant. I think the difference between ambient and final temperature is 3 degrees greater in sleeping bag mode versus quilt mode. And remember, I was on a R4.2 sleeping pad. It was not that cold out. I think if the temperature was, say, 40 degrees ambient, that the quilt mode would have underperformed the sleeping bag even more. I might get around to testing that sometime, and if I do, I'll give you the results. But as of now, I think that my data shows that a properly built sleeping bag is warmer than a quilt. Yeah, I think I'm probably going to get some comments on that. Hey, click the like, leave those comments, subscribe. But regardless, thanks for watching, and I hope I see you out on the trail.